Hello students, today we are going to study the chapter The Enemy from our book Vistas. The story is set during the Second World War. A Japanese doctor finds an American prisoner of war at his doorstep. He is in a dilemma that being a doctor, should he save the wounded man, or being a Japanese, should he hand over the enemy to the army. यहाँ डॉक्टर सडाव जो मेन कैरेक्टर हैं वो काफ़ी कंफ्यूज हैं कि वो अपनी प्रोफेशनल ड्यूटी निभा के उस अमेरिकन सोल्जर को बचाएं और पैट्रियोटिक शो करें अपने आप को और उसे आर्मी को हैंड ओवर कर दें. The writer introduces the main character of the story, Dr. Sadao Hoki. Dr. Sadao's house was situated on the coast of Japan. He had been living there since his childhood. The house had a low height and was made of stone. It was set upon the rocky beach, which had a boundary line made with pine trees that were tilted towards one side. When Dr. Sadao was a child, he would climb up the pine trees. On his visit to the South Seas, he would see men do so in order to get coconut from the trees. He would accompany his father to the island of the South Seas often. His father would point towards the islands and would say that those were the stepping stones towards the future of Japan. Dr. Sodao would question him childishly that where would they reach from those islands. His father would reply that it was not known, as it depends on the future. The future had no limits. It depends on mankind's how it shaped its future. Sadao retained all the things that his father would tell him as a child. His father never played or joked with him. They shared a mature relation, and his father underwent a lot of hardship to bring him up. Sadao knew that his father was concerned about his education. He was sent to America at the age of 22 to study surgery and medicine. He returned at the age of 30. Before dying, Sadao's father saw Sadao become famous not only as a surgeon but also as a scientist. Sadao was on his way to discover a treatment for wounds which would make them absolutely clean. So he was not sent abroad with the armed forces as a doctor. Also, he was retained in Japan because the old general was suffering from an ailment which needed to be operated upon in case of an emergency. The writer describes the scene outside Dr. Sadao's house. As the days were usually warm and the sea's waves were cold, the nights became foggy. Dr. Sadao saw the boundary of a nearby island became invisible gradually as it got covered in the mist. Slowly, the mist was coming closer to him. Soon, there would be mist all around his house. At that time, he would go back into the house to his wife, Hannah, who was waiting for him along with their two children. But as Sadao could go inside, the door opened and his wife looked out for him. She was wearing a dark blue-colored gown over her dress. She lovingly crossed her arm with his, smiled at him, remained silent, and stood by him. They had met in America. Sadao knew that his father would marry him to a Japanese girl only, and so he ensured this before falling in love with her. सडाओ के पिताजी उसकी शादी सिर्फ एक जापानीज गर्ल से कराते, इसीलिए सडाओ ने उससे प्यार करने से पहले ये कंफर्म कर लिया कि वो क्या है, एक जापानीज है. सडाओ considered himself to be lucky to have accidentally met her at an American professor house. He wondered that had he not met her, he would not have got a wife all his life. He thought that the professor and his wife were kind, as they were keen to help foreign students. He was glad that they had accepted this kindness and went to their house, because it was there that he had met Hana. Sadao would often tell Hana that it was a mere coincidence that he went to the professor's house that night, as the rooms in the house were small, the food was not good, and the professor's wife was very talkative. If he had not gone there that night, he would not have met Hana. At that time, Hana was a new student. Sadao had thought that he would love her if at all it would be possible for him. डॉक्टर सडाओ बताते हैं कि ये एक कोइंसिडेंस था, हाना से उनका मिलना एक प्रोफेसर के यहाँ. वो प्रोफेसर के घर उस रात ऑलमोस्ट नहीं जाने वाले थे, बिकॉज कि वो घर काफ़ी छोटा था, खाना अच्छा नहीं था, और प्रोफेसर की वाइफ काफ़ी ज़्यादा बात करने वाली थी. फॉर दीज रीजन्स वो उस दिन नहीं जाने की सोच रहे थे, बट लकीली ही वेंट देयर एंड ही मेट हाना देयर. When Sadao reached professor's house, there Hana came, and she was a new student. So Sadao thought that he would love her if at all it would be possible for him. It means he wanted to ensure that she should be a Japanese girl, otherwise his father would not allow him to marry her. So before falling in love with her, he made sure that she was a Japanese. Sadao and Hana loved each other even after having 2 children. After many years of marriage, they had not married in a haste in America. Rather, they returned to Japan, sought permission from their parents, and then got married in a traditional Japanese ceremony. They had discussed all the details before the wedding. They were happy with each other. Hana rested her cheek against Sadao's arm with affection. That moment they saw a figure appear out of the mist. It appeared black in color due to the mist in the air. The outline of a man's body was visible in the mist. He walked unsteadily with his arms above the head. It was an indication that he was a prisoner. The man walked a few steps and then disappeared in the mist. Upon seeing the figure, Hana reacted by asking that, "Who was that?" She took her arm out of Sadao's arm, and both of them went forward over the railing of the veranda to have a closer look at the man. They saw him again. He was crawling on his hands and knees. Then he fell on his face and kept on lying there. Probably he had fainted. As the area had villages full of fishermen, Sadao said that probably it was a fisherman who had been washed off his boat. He ran to help him. Hannah followed him. They loose slips of her hair flew as she ran. This part of the coast was not inhabited as it had a dangerous rock on it. As the rock were pointed, the man could be badly injured, although he had managed to come through them. As the Japanese couple saw the man, they realized that he was badly injured. The sand on which he lay had blood stains on one side, which indicated that he was wounded. Sadao said that the man was wounded. He approached the man who lay motionless with his face buried in the sand. An old cap hung on his head. It was soaked with the sea water. His dress was also wet and torn. Sadao turned the man's head. As they saw the face, Hannah spoke confidentially that he was a white, that is, an American. The injured man was an American. As his cap fell off, they saw his wet, yellow colored hair, which had not been cut for a long time. He was young. His face had such marks which indicated that he had been tortured. He had a rough, unkempt yellow colored beard. As he had fainted, he did not know of the presence of Sadao and Hannah. Sadao was reminded that the man was wounded as he had seen blood stains on the sand. As he was a doctor, he moved his trained fingers around the man's back to search for the wound. He felt blood oozing out of a wound in the lower part of his back. It was a gunshot. The man had been injured a few days ago. He had not got any medical help to treat the wound, as he had himself used some black colored powdery substance on it. The sharp rocks on the shore had pierced it, and so it was bleeding. Hannah was concerned that the man was injured and said in a low voice that he was bleeding. The mist had intensified now. The three of them could not be spotted by anyone. Moreover, the fishermen and the rag pickers did not visit the place at that time of the day. Sadao muttered to himself that what should he do to save this man? But his trained hand seemed of his own intentions. He was looking for something to stop the bleeding. Suddenly, he got moss that were grown widely on the beaches, and with the help of those moss, he packed the bleeding spot. The American soldier groaned with pain but could not awake. Sadao answered to himself and said that the best thing was to put the man back into the sea. As the bleeding stopped, he stood up and removed the dust from his hands. Hannah supported his opinion but looked intently at the man as he lay still. Sadao said that if they gave him shelter, they would be arrested for sheltering an enemy. If they handed him over to the Japanese army as a prisoner, then he would die in the prison. As he thought that both the options were not favorable, so the best option was to put him back into the sea. Hannah added that the kindest act for them was to put him back into the sea. Both of them did not move ahead to do so. Rather, they stared at the motionless figure with dislike. They disliked him because he was an enemy and American. सडाव और हाना दोनों एग्री करते हैं कि बेस्ट ऑप्शन क्या है उनके लिए कि इसे वापस समुद्र में डाल दिया जाए बिकॉज दो कंडीशंस हैं कि या तो उसको आर्मी को हैंड ओवर किया जाएगा वहाँ पे वो मर जाएगा प्रिजन में और दूसरी चीज़ कि अगर उसे वो घर पे रखते हैं तो वो लोग मुसीबत में पड़ जाएंगे और उनको लोग पुलिस वाले उन्हें अरेस्ट कर सकते हैं बट ये ऑप्शन सिलेक्ट करने के बावजूद भी वो दोनों उसे वापस समुद्र में नहीं डालते हैं और उसे देखते रहते हैं और वो उसको पसंद भी नहीं करते बिकॉज ही वॉज एन अमेरिकन जो जापान का इनेमी है हाना वॉज इंक्विजिटिव as he asked about the man's identity. Sadao replied that he appeared to be an American. He picked up the torn cap and read the words written on it, which were slightly visible. He said that the man was a sailor from an American warship and read out the words US Navy written on the cap. They concluded that the man had been taken into captivity during the war. Sadao and Hana discussed that the man had tried to escape from the prison and had been shot in the back. They were not able to gather the courage to throw him into the sea. Hana called upon Sadao with firmness. She asked him if he was ready to put him into the sea. Sadao told her that he was able to do so and asked that did Hana have the courage for it. Hana replied in the negative and added that if he could not do it by himself, then she had to help him. Sadao was reluctant in throwing the man into the sea. He was hesitating. He reasoned that if the man was well, he would hand him over to the police without any hesitation. He added that he was not concerned about the man and considered him to be an enemy as he was an American. He commented that the injured man was a common man as his face looked as if he was a foolish person. He wanted to say that he was not bothered about the injured man, but his own concern was that he was wounded. वो अमेरिकन सोल्जर से ज़्यादा कंसर्न नहीं रखता था बट द वुंड ही हैज़ गॉट जो उसको चोट लगी थी वो उसको लेके ज़्यादा सीरियस था Hannah said that if he could not throw him into the sea, then the second option was to carry him home. Sadao was concerned that the servant would object as they would shelter an enemy. घर के नौकर उनका ऑब्जेक्शन करेंगे कि वो घर में एक इनेमी को रख रहे हैं Hannah said that they would tell them that they intended to hand him over to the police once he recovered. She told him that they must do that. She added that they must consider their children's future and Sadao's position. If they did not hand over a prisoner of war to the police, they would be in danger. Sadao replied that certainly he would do so and he did not think of doing anything else. Sadao and Hannah lifted the injured man into the house. He was very light, The writer compares his weight to that of a hen that has not been fed for a long time, and its body loses flesh and reduces into mere feathers and a skeleton. The man's arms were hanging, and the duo carried him up to the steps into the side door of the house. The door opened into a passage, and they went down the passage towards an empty bedroom. So here we will stop in this video. For the next part, we'll come with another video. Thank you.